Last night was a disappointing night for a lot of people. Even if you made a full meal from soup to pie, even if you had your family all around you, even if you zoomed in with family and friends all around the country or the world, few of us were able to gather for the full Thanksgiving experience with the full mishpacha that we might be used to, or the full sense of joy and gratitude and bounty that might have accompanied us on other Thanksgivings. Some of us were just with one other person, some of us with two or three, some of us were alone last night. Some of us, some of you, have been mostly alone for 9 months now. Some of us have been cooped up with one or two or three other people, and that has its own stresses. Some of us are grieving a person we love or a way of life that we loved. It's a long, strange, sad time that we're in. And then along comes Thanksgiving, already a complicated holiday, whether because of its origins or its dynamics. And here we are trying to celebrate it in a pandemic. It brings up all of the loneliness and all of the longing and all of the emptiness that we've been carrying all this time. On a practical level, just as an eater, Thanksgiving is the ultimate test of knowing when you're full. It's a meal designed to push you past that internal limit. Who decided, here's my big question, who decided that you need rolls in addition to turkey, potato, sweet potato stuffing, and some kind of green? I mean, who would look at that and think, yes, we need bread here? And what's up with appetizers? People serve appetizers before that meal. Why would there ever be the thought of anything before Thanksgiving to make you a little bit full before you begin? The night is entirely about enticing you toward another scoop of mashed potatoes or another piece of pie. I think I can remember maybe 2 Thanksgivings ever in my life when I realized the moment exactly when I was full and stopped at that point. It has not been the majority of my experience. If we look at the Jewish food blessings, we see wisdom there about satiety. Many people know that in Judaism, while we do say a brief blessing before putting food in our mouths, the essential blessing for food comes at the moment when we feel full. We are supposed to be discerning that moment and then knowing we've had enough. And Birkat Hamazon is designed to bring our awareness to satiety, to the feeling of being sated. In this week's parasha, Leah becomes sated, becomes aware that she has enough. And that is something extraordinary given her story, something worthy learning from. In Genesis 29:35, the text says of Leah, "V'ta'amod miledet," she stopped giving birth. More precisely, it means, as Chizkuni, the commentator, points out, that she paused in giving birth because she would again bear a child named Dinah. But for now, ta'amod miledet, she stood still. She stopped giving birth. No more babies for a little while. Why, the commentators want to know? Well, Abraham ibn Ezra has the following explanation. At this point, Leah has 4 sons, and she says to God, "Lo echmod lihiyot li od." I don't covet or desire or long to have more for myself. I have been given enough. Ka'omer odeh et Hashem, shenatan li kol zeh, v'yaspik li. So I say thanks to God, who has given me all of this. It is enough for me. This doesn't sound so surprising, right? Leah has 4 children. Of course, she feels like it's enough, and she feels grateful. But if we look more carefully at Leah's whole story, we see how remarkable this moment is. Remember that Leah wasn't supposed to marry Jacob, or at least Jacob didn't want to marry Leah. He doesn't love her, and she knows that. And when we first meet Leah, the Torah tells us that her eyes are soft, ve'enei Leah rakot. It's usually translated as her eyes were weak. Maybe she had some difficulty seeing. But literally it means her eyes were soft. And the Midrash tells us that her eyes were soft because she cried so much. And she cried so much because she saw that it had been foretold that she would marry Esau and Rachel would marry Jacob, and she didn't want that. She had a longing to marry Jacob. She was in love with him, and she longed day and night for his love for her. But Jacob did not love her. He didn't even really see her. He loved Rachel from the first time he saw her. He loved Rachel so much that the first 7 years he worked for her hand in marriage, the text says that 7 years, quote, seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. And then it says, V'ehav gam et Rachel mi Leah. He loved Rachel from Leah. It means like compared to Leah, or maybe even as opposed to Leah. The next verse tells us, Vayira Adonai ki snu'a Leah. Adonai saw that Leah was, the translation usually says unloved, but the text actually says hated, not wanted. So here is Leah, consumed by longing for Jacob's love, married to him, hoping that she can somehow get her husband to see her, to care for her, to want her. She gives birth to her first child, Reuven, and says, God has seen my affliction. Now my husband will love me. But it doesn't happen. And then she gives birth to her second child, Shimon. And she says, this is because God heard that I was unloved, same word, snu'ah, hated, and has given me this one also. She still has hope and longing for Jacob's love when she names her third child, Levi. This time, she says, my husband will become attached to me, will accompany me, for I have borne him 3 sons. Look at the pathos of this character who is craving to be seen, to be known, to be loved, who despite 3 children feels empty, needing so much her husband's attention, affection, attachment, even just accompaniment. It does not at that moment seem that Leah will become a person who ever feels sated, who ever feels that she has enough. But then something shifts, and Leah decides that despite her fate as an unloved or even a hated wife, despite her loneliness and her longing, and all of the ways that her life is not what she wished it would be, that she actually has enough, that she can actually feel full. And so with the birth of her 4th child, she's no longer defined by her longing. She's no longer defined by her lack or by her emptiness. It is still there, of course. It still hurts her. We can imagine. She still has all of those emotions, but she names her child Thanksgiving. Vatomar hapa'am ode et Adonai, al ken kara shemo Yehuda. And she said, this time I give thanks to God. I am grateful. I acknowledge what I have. Therefore, she called his name Thanksgiving, Yehuda, Judah. 2 things to note about this. First, the Talmud in Brachot 7b says that Leah was the first person in the Torah to be grateful. Now that is a strange thing to say because we know it's not true. Abraham fell on his face in gratitude. Sarah was so grateful that she called her son laughter. In Psalm 139, we see that Adam expresses gratitude in the Garden of Eden. But Leah's credited as the first person to feel gratitude because she was able to feel fullness within or despite emptiness. Now, I said there were 2 things to note about Leah naming Judah. The second is that we're named for Judah, Yehudim, Jews. It comes from Yehuda, Judea, Judah. We are the people of thanks. We are the people who live in praise and gratitude no matter what the conditions of our lives or of our world. The Hebrew for gratitude, hoda'ah, odeh, yudah, it means more precisely acknowledgement, meaning you can start by just naming and knowing that something is good and worthy of blessing, even if you don't have the feeling about it. Just offering words of praise as a practice, even when the days are bleak, even in the midst of loss, even when we're lonely and longing. This is a practice that generates a greater feeling of fullness, a greater feeling of enough. And what we know, what we all know, is that sometimes the kind of gratitude that Leah expresses in this parsha is the sweetest kind. Think about a time when you were raw with mourning. Maybe that's now. Maybe that's a long time ago. And remember a moment within that time when someone was kind, or the sun suddenly came out, or you were aware of a simple pleasure like a cup of tea. And right in the midst of your aching heart, with eyes bleary from so much weeping, with an unfathomable emptiness, there was suddenly a ray of goodness right there in the midst of all the terrible. And you could see it. And for a brief moment, you felt full. You felt you had, in one small way, enough. That is Hoda'ah. That is Leah's lesson. That is what she named us. Who is a Jew? Rabbi Shai Held asks. One who discovers the possibility of gratitude even amidst heartbreak. He goes on, disappointment need not preclude gratitude, nor need gratitude crowd out the very possibility of disappointment. Judaism does not ask us to choose one feeling over the other, but rather makes space, indeed seeks to teach us to make space for the sheer complexity and contradictoriness of human experience. Who better than Leah to teach us that a broken heart can also have moments of profound fullness? What a message for Thanksgiving Shabbat in the 9th month of a global pandemic. That we can be disappointed, we can even be heartbroken, we can be longing, we can be lonely, and we can also be grateful. We can not have all that we need or all that we want. We could be in the midst of incompleteness and still feel full sometimes. May we, on this pandemic Shabbat Thanksgiving, find causes for gratitude despite it all. May we find glimpses of satisfaction along with dissatisfaction, satiety along with lack, wholeness in the midst of a broken world. Even when there's emptiness around us or within us, may we sometimes feel full. Shabbat Shalom.